I first met Lauren during our college years, and to be honest, I never thought our relationship would go very far. She was painfully shy, full of insecurities, and seemed more like a quiet, timid wallflower than anything else. Not many guys paid her much attention. She was reserved, self-conscious, and unsure of herself. At the time, I wasn't really in love with her. In fact, I was just looking to add another notch to my dating belt. But then something changed. Lauren started going to the gym, signing up for memberships, and spending more time at beauty salons. Within a year, she was almost unrecognizable. The shy, overlooked girl I had once known had transformed into a stunning woman who caught everyone's eye. Deep down, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, almost like I had played a part in her transformation. My buddies were envious, remembering how I had snagged her back when she wasn't at her best, and now here she was, blossoming into someone truly irresistible. And if I'm being honest, our private life was incredible. She was insatiable, but still sweet, and that was more than enough for me. After graduation, I proposed to her, and a year later, we became parents. Our relationship didn't change. We remained as in love as ever, always respectful of each other's space. I never doubted her loyalty, not once. It never even crossed my mind to worry. She devoted herself entirely to our daughter, spending her free time nurturing her while I worked long hours, content knowing that we had a rock-solid bond. Even when some of our friends' marriages fell apart, it never occurred to us to go down that road. We were happy, every single day. People would often ask us how we managed to keep the spark alive for so long, and we'd always just shrug and say that there wasn't a secret. We simply loved each other. Eventually, we took out a mortgage on a house, and that meant Lauren had to return to work as well. She landed a job in a predominantly female workplace, and at first she came home exhausted, telling me all about the drama she faced in her new office. A nest of vipers, as she jokingly called it. I felt bad for her, so whenever I could, I'd take her and our daughter on little weekend getaways to help her unwind. Over time, though, I noticed a change in Lauren. She became calmer, less stressed. Even the atmosphere at her work seemed to improve, especially around the holidays when office parties were held and people began to bond more. Then, on New Year's, Lauren mentioned that there would be another office celebration. I didn't see the harm in it. I knew it was the same routine as always. I told her to enjoy herself, and on the day of the party, she wore a short dress, one I had actually bought for her. I made a comment about it, but she smirked and reminded me, "You're the one who bought it, remember?" I had to admit, she looked incredible. Over the years, her figure had become more womanly, more alluring. It wasn't surprising that other men might notice her. Still, since I thought it was an all-women's event, or at least I assumed it was, I didn't insist she change. I just asked her to be back by 10 p.m. She said maybe 11, but I didn't mind much. I figured she deserved to have fun. After she left, I spent the evening with our daughter, helping her with homework while I kept one eye on the clock. At around 10 p.m., Lauren called to tell me everything was great. She was having a blast and she'd be home soon. I was happy for her, reminding her not to forget the time. But as the clock ticked past 11 p.m. and she still wasn't home, I started to feel a twinge of irritation. This was unusual. Lauren had never been one to break a promise or blow past a set time. I tried calling her, but there was no answer. I put our daughter to bed, my mind racing with questions. What could be happening? Who was she really with, especially dressed like that? I lay awake in bed, my anxiety rising with each passing minute. The hours dragged on, and the longer I waited, the more the knot in my stomach tightened. Eventually, sometime after 2 a.m., my patience ran out, but still no sign of Lauren. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I had barely managed to doze off when, near 3 a.m., my phone rang, jolting me awake. It was Lauren on the line, clearly drunk, and laughing about something with male voices echoing in the background. My blood began to boil, and I demanded that she come home immediately. Instead of listening, she just giggled, teasing me for getting so worked up. The sound of her voice was like a slap in the face. My anger intensified, and before I knew it, my yelling woke our daughter, who was frightened by the noise. I had no choice but to hang up and calm her down, my thoughts racing with confusion and frustration. At around 5 a.m., Lauren called again, slurring her words, saying she'd ordered a taxi. I pressed my face to the window and saw her step out of a sleek, unfamiliar car. Definitely not a typical cab. The moment she reached our building, it was clear she was completely wasted, stumbling as she approached the door. But that wasn't even the worst part. As she stumbled inside, her hair was a mess, her stockings ripped, and she looked utterly disheveled. The sight of her in such a state filled me with a surge of rage. Without thinking, I smacked her, not to hurt her, but to snap her out of her drunken haze. That's when I noticed the hickey on her neck, the one that confirmed everything I had been dreading. My stomach churned, a cold sense of betrayal washing over me. I demanded an explanation, but she could barely stand, let alone offer any coherent answers. She muttered something about just partying, but her appearance made it painfully obvious that her idea of partying had gone far beyond a few drinks. I couldn't shake the feeling that there had been more involved, maybe more than one person. Meanwhile, our daughter, Emily, had woken up from the noise, but I didn't let her near Lauren, who was barely functioning, her movements robotic as she stumbled toward the bathroom. Lauren collapsed into bed and slept through the entire next day. I was left in a daze, unsure of how to process everything that had just happened. This was the last thing I ever expected from her. I had never imagined she could betray me like this. Eventually, I called my mom, who had always been my sounding board, level-headed and wise. She adored Lauren and often said I'd found the perfect wife. When I told her what had happened, she was speechless, clearly as shocked as I was. After a long pause, she simply told me to do what I needed to do. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep living in this lie. I made the decision. I was going to file for divorce. The next day, after filing the papers, I came home to find Lauren awake, clearly still feeling the effects of the night. She looked at me with desperate eyes, trying to salvage whatever she could of my opinion of her. I looked her in the eye and asked, "Tell me the truth. Did you cheat on me last night?" She nodded, her face crumpling as she collapsed at my feet, sobbing uncontrollably and begging for my forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to touch her. The disgust I felt was too overwhelming. I had always told her that cheating was the one thing I could never forgive, and yet she had still done it. The betrayal was unbearable. What shocked me even more was Emily, my 10-year-old daughter. She took my side immediately, saying that after the divorce, she wanted to live with me. The maturity she displayed in that moment made me so proud. She was more level-headed than I ever could have hoped for, and I knew then that keeping her with me was the right decision. If she stayed with Lauren, who knew what kind of example she would be exposed to? So, we packed up and moved to a new city where I owned a small apartment. Emily quickly made new friends, and she barely even looked back at our old life. As for Lauren, from what I gathered, she bounced around, hooking up with various guys, working a low-paying job, and renting a small room. She tried reaching out to me, but when that went nowhere, she began bragging to anyone who would listen about how I had cheated on her. I can't pretend to understand that logic, but it didn't matter. We were done. I had moved on, and Emily was safe, happy, and thriving with me. If Lauren wanted to continue spinning her version of events, that was on her. Life has a way of sorting things out, and as far as I'm concerned, I had no regrets. I had left that mess behind. The only thing that mattered now was starting fresh, with no illusions, no lies, just peace.